This is Rebuild to Win, Voices from the Grassroots, hosted by Yusef Bunchy Shakur, Kwazi and Tawanna Honeycomb Pay. Brought to you by the Detroit is Different Podcast Network.
I just want to tell the whole world about my life.
We live.
Greetings, everyone. Free the land.
Free the land.
We here rebuilding the win. Detroit, we do mind dying.
Every day.
The podcast. Thank you for tuning in on this March 11th. Is it today the 11th?
Yeah, it's
2023.
International Black Women's Month.
Oh, the whole month.
Yeah,
that's the whole month. I'm just trying to figure out what today is. What time is it, as they say? Welcome to the show. My name is Kwazi and Tawanna, co-hosted with brother Yusef Bunchy Shakur, Tawanna Honeycomb Patty, two of my comrade in arms, and we're here to bring some information to you that we hoping that you would find useful in your struggle for a better life and towards liberation. Anybody want to introduce themselves? Just say something in case we had new listeners tapping in.
Yeah,
Tawanna?
What up, though? I'm Tawanna, also known as Honeycomb. And yeah, I'm just geeked to be with my brothers on a bi-weekly basis to discuss, what's happening in the world, not just Detroit. We are in Detroit. We're rooted in Detroit, but what's happening globally. Bring some newness to the discussion, some of the things we think are missing from the debate, and expand on some of the things that currently exist in the debate.
That's right.
What up, though? I am the man of the hour.
All right.
Before I let you go.
If y'all saw that cover photo, y'all would know that's
that's why I had to say this. It was an inside joke. So I look like Frankie Beverly Mays. Just had to share that with you guys, man. I'm looking forward to today's conversation, and every other type of conversation that we have. I think with two other great, brilliant minds. I always say that folks don't necessarily have to think alike, but they definitely have to have like values, and we have like values. And I think our ability not to think alike is what attracts us to do this, and the ability to, Tawanna says, debate discourse, to have those type of debate discourse in a conversation with folks who are rooted in the same type of place, but globally, to bring some conversations, man. So I'm excited. My big brother brought the agenda today.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
He's serious about this. He's serious.
Trying to stay on path, man. Trying not to be distracted and doing too many digressions.
Hey, before we go, who that on your shirt, bro?
Oh man, they can't see us.
Can't see that?
They can't see us.
Move your what's name out the way. Bam, there you go.
They don't recognize that person.
Tell him.
That's brother Kukiyan Ulubala. You know what I'm saying? Formerly known as Twain Myers. He was one of the younger members of the Black Liberation Army. Fierce fighter.
Was he part of the Panthers too, or did he just come in for the BLA?
I don't know his early history.
Okay, because he was so young, so he might have been just a BLA.
Yes. He was an intimate comrade with the likes of Assata Shakur and
Sekou Odenga.
Yes, he was, a very respected fighter for our people during a time of intense repression. That's a topic we're going to be talking about in this show. We're going to be talking about, we're going to add on to our ongoing conversation on the surveillance technology being deployed as a repressive measures against the mass population. We have mass surveillance capitalism, and we're gonna be talking about that. But brother Twain Myers, they might have heard his name in a few hip hop songs here and there.
Dead prayers.
He was a warrior, and they literally took a joint task force to bring this brother down. feds, New York State Police, New York municipal cops. Brother went out in a blaze of gunfire, not to glorify, that, but the fact that we don't often lift people with courage in our history. We lift up people with big mouths, people that talk loud,
Big mouth.
but we don't always lift up the people that actually do the fighting that we often talk about is needed. A lot, we hear a lot of conversation these days, and this is not to encourage anybody to do anything stupid. But we often talk about how, in the face of all this police terrorism, you hear this talk in the background about what we should do or what should happen. And there were people that actually did these things in the past, and there was a lot of contradictions, a lot of failures in some of those actions, but the courage was there. The determination was there, and we got to recognize those who stepped up, who made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of the liberation and the dignity of our people. And in that spirit, I'm rocking this Twyman Myers Kukiyan Olubala sweatshirt, because we definitely I'm always gonna keep a freedom fighter. And I mean, I say fighter, I'm talking about those who carry straps, the Harriet Tubmans, the IDB Wells, they, the women I love the most in history that carry straps. We often talk about or you hear the conversations about protecting Black women, and I just think in history, I'm like, what about all those times when it was the Black woman protecting the Black man?
Right.
But the fact is, we got to protect each other. None of us are safe. We are equally vulnerable under this beast of settler colonialism. And so, yes, that's what this is all about. But let's get with this agenda. We want to start out with a few news items. We don't know what everybody is getting in their news feeds, but it's a few things we just thought would kind of open up and kind of segue into our show. One of them being in Hawaii, there was a situation where a couple indigenous Hawaiian men were arrested and charged with beating a settler American who ventured onto their land. And I believe it happened in 2014. He settled into their land, they little village area, and was trying to set up shop like the Zionists do in occupied Palestine, like settlers did right here on Central North America, now known as the United States of America. And they beat him off the land. He was trying to build on their land, and they beat him. They didn't beat him to death, but they were charged recently with that crime as a hate crime. It was considered a hate crime because they were Hawaiians, and this dude was of Anglo-American persuasion. So because of that distinction, they called it a hate crime. They kind of used race to frame that scenario. Unfortunately, when you look at the bigger picture, when you look at the narrative, they are really diverting people from a colonial perspective. Because currently, if we and we don't see this on C-SPAN, CNN, MSNBC, they have a Hawaiian independence struggle active right now in 2023 that seeks to reclaim Hawaiian territory for Hawaiian people. They don't want to be a part of the United States. They never did. And, this is a struggle. So when you frame the defense of territory against an invader, developers who come in and just do what they want to do because of who they are, we had to address that and try to reframe it, because the narrative often is framed by those who control the media and those in power, that they can turn us against these men. It wasn't a hate crime. It was an anti-colonial situation happening, and we had to be clear on that. So look that up in the news. Again, that's the Hawaiian news blurb. We also want to bring up something else related to repressive activity. This one, it being in the national territory, historically known as the Black Belt in the South. The state of Mississippi is pushing a number of bills through the legislature, the state house, and the Senate to impose a number of different measures against the city of Jackson, which is the state capital. One of those acts of legislation is House Bill 1020, and which is to expand the state footprint for the Capitol Police, and they're trying to do a big development to where they're also trying to impose special prosecutors and several judges from the state level upon the people of Jackson, which is a majority New African city. And the people in Jackson are pushing back hard against this. They trying to, with this House Bill 1020, they're trying to really just bring political repression on the city that has a progressive mayor in office who's trying to really, set a new tone for democratic politics down in that black belt territory. And I think it's something that we should all pay attention to, because it kind of falls in line with other measures that's taking place throughout the South, including like Florida, where they push back against what they call critical race theory and advanced placement in black studies. In the next issue of Rebuild newspaper, I hope you look forward to getting it. It'll be an article in there where one of the Conrads did an excellent piece, just pointing out the fact that they never want us to have an education in the first place. So it's all in due course with their history, and we shouldn't be shocked and surprised, but we also should be pushing back against it. But we should also be practicing self-determined means of educating our people and ourselves. Next on the news, hot topics. I seen on the news this morning, there's a hospital in Haiti that is shutting down allegedly in response to some of the organized gang violence that has arisen in the absence of a stable government in Haiti since the killing of the last president, and people are afraid to step up into that position because of the chaos. Chaos is how colonialism gets in there and do their thing. So now we have the Louisiana National Guard alleging to come over there and do some construction works, the Army doing construction work, that come in and aid. But I haven't heard anything about their role in dealing with these roving gangs that are, terrorizing people and stealing resources. So, we're going to talk a little bit more later in the program about the National Guard and its role in repression in this country.
And Kwazi, can I add one more hot topic?
Sure.
Please. Just something for people to pay attention to. The Silicon Valley Bank, probably one of the largest banks in the United States, crashed the other day. And it's a bank that loans a lot of money to like tech startups, right? And so there's tens of thousands of people right now who don't know how they're going to be paid, etc. And so I'm raising this because we saw with the 2008 crash, financial crash, that when banks like this shutter, it has an impact on the everyday people, but we're the last to know about it. And so I just want people to pay attention to what's happening in the financial industry. It don't mean go run and take all your money out, but something to think about, even on our little bit of money that we have. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so, cryptocurrency, when we saw that crash, a lot of people didn't pay attention to the impact that took on the industry. And so the people with the least amount of money are going to be the ones hardest impacted. So that's just something for folks to put on their radar.
The people with the least money suffer from those who messing around with the money.
The money's not secure.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to move this agenda along, and we're going to get into what we call a section where we talk about books that we all bring a book. We kind of suggest a book, books that inspires, books that's either relevant to the topic or just relevant to something that's important to us at a given time in our own development, or something that we just think you might need to know. And I'm gonna raise, this. I wish I could say it was a shameless plug, but this is a book I wrote in 2010, so it's over a decade old. It's not a shameless plug because it's no longer in print. So I can't sell it.
Reprint it.
And this book is Stop Snitching. It was volume 1 of an anticipated 2-volume book, but I never got to the second volume. But I wrote it at the time when snitching was, kind of prominent in the public conversation, and I thought to explore that topic. But I brought the book primarily for a solution-oriented section near the end of this book that we'll be talking about as we sum up the show. but definitely check it out.
Can you just be clear on like what you mean really quick about, and if we go past things on the agenda, then we'll carry them to the next show. But I think it's important to like just not drop that title and not say what you mean by it.
And
what I say about
hold up. And also, can you reference that time period? There was a slogan that was being talked about prominent community activists in the city of Detroit that also played a role in you writing this book. You remember?
Don't tell, just don't snitch, just tell.
Yes.
They tried to play semantics with the same thing, but no, ultimately, what I was trying to do with it was I was trying to explore the topic. I didn't advocate one way or another because I wanted people to really arrive at their own understanding. But what I understood was, what I learned was, there was a lot of components to snitching, or to this whole conversation about informing, that weren't being discussed in these mass media conversations. And of course, crime was always the hot topic,
Right.
that leads to snitching being a prominent thing, and in terms of a lot of people advocating for it. But we didn't understand snitching, or the impacts or implications, the long and short term ramifications of snitching, because we already, just keeping in context, that we come from a community where we lack trust already.
Right.
Historically, we have an issue with trusting one another. So to voluntarily, project snitching as something that we should, willingly do, and snitching at the end of the day is a one person informing on another person to a third party, divulging privileged information to a third party, and that third party is often law enforcement. So, and it's often done in to gain personal benefits, such as I've been arrested for something, but to get out of my situation, I'm gonna tell on my boy, and you know what I'm saying. So now, but while you under the police, they let you go, and now you an informant, but now you left to commit more crimes as an informant, because you gotta be authentic in these streets.
Right.
So now you out here committing more offenses against the people, so they can catch somebody else. And what happens is, and I have in this book a couple of appendices. One of the brothers happened to be released now. My brother Lucino Hamilton, who was wrongfully convicted. We have wrongful convictions because of this. So I kind of frame a lot of things. We kind of deal with the whole. I use Germany as a model for how before the collapse of the Berlin Wall, in East Germany, they had a snitch culture where they had hundreds of thousands of citizens who were informing on one another. You had husbands informing on wives, university professors, informing. And let's be clear, there's no such thing as information that's not useful, because the government takes this information, extrapolate what they want from it. So what you have for dinner becomes something that you put on a report.
Especially if you use an EBT card and they feel like you shouldn't have bought lobster, right? Then your benefits get taken. I mean, you're right. All of that information is leveraged to make a determination about who you are as a human. I do want to say, I want us to bring this book back and have a deeper dialogue, because I grew up thinking this. Snitching was people who were together in a commission of a quote unquote, using it in quotes, crime. And then the person within that circle who's with the people creating it then inform for their own business, whether they have been violently repressed and forced to do it or not. That's a whole nother conversation. But some kind of way they end up informing, which is opposite of a concerned community member who might think that their speaking is contributing to a more vibrant, safer neighborhood. So I think sometimes what happens is everyday people who have no analysis about what we're talking about feel like they saw something wrong, they weren't involved in it, and then they inform thinking they're going to create a safer environment.
That's not snitching,
but it's labeled. But it's labeled it.
I think with the problem, not the problem what you're saying, the problem what you're identifying, like hip hop, right? And a lot of hip hop guys, oh, you're snitching, whoop, whoop, whoop. And that subculture is now setting the table of how regular, so-called regular citizens should operate. But the vulnerability that's being uplifted, but it also is tied to the policing. Because
Right.
again, none
Because
of
the carcerality mindset, the
correct.
carceral mindset makes you think that if you inform this third party militarized force, that they're going to come and extract the dehumanized person in your
Mhm.
neighborhood, and then once they extract them, then everything is going to go,
No, right.
right. So
That's
I'm
dealing
just
with
saying, like a
symptoms,
whole
right.
nother
Yeah, it is because
episode, we can, do a deep dive on just
Right.
the,
No, it's
we can talk
definitely
about Al Sharpton
no.
putting that subject.
Yeah, wearing a wire gun. What's against the SADA?
No, but before then, he wore a wire against
The mob.
the mob, right?
Yeah.
And which all this ties into a different level of surveillance
right.
for the state that we don't necessarily connect the dots.
Yeah.
Which, going to your point around
Well, the
as
thing, right.
people who are regular citizens, or and I'm using the word loosely, citizens who are just doing every day,
Yeah.
and then folks and I think that was the heart of your book, of folks who are being recruited, like a White Boy Rick and et cetera, operate as an arm of
But if
this.
you know the story of White Boy Rick, you know he was not like some teenager who just
Oh no,
voluntarily
that's
went
great point.
into, you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
He was
he was kind of beat into that position. Like,
he was beat.
well, I mean, being beat into a position isn't always physical
Okay.
assault. Like, I mean, the way that they went after his father, the way they went after his
Oh,
family,
okay,
the way
okay,
they went,
okay,
you know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I'm not
Yes.
too much familiar with that back.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
a lot
Okay.
that was involved in wrapping him up,
So like
and
he was
making him a
kingpin
that he really
right.
wasn't.
So he's coerced by the circumstances.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And he was a kid.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was like, we forget he was about 14.
Yeah.
I still
So,
rat is rat though.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but you gotta, if we're gonna talk about repression, we gotta talk
Yeah,
about
I mean-
all the tenements of repression.
No,
got you.
I agree, and like I say, just so we can move on. I mean, my intention with this book, the subtitle sums it up. The book says "Stop Snitching," but the subtitle is "Does it really reduce crime in the Black community?"
Right.
That was the question I was attempting to address.
I'm looking forward to part 2.
So definitely we'll talk to it. Yeah, and you know, and just one more thing before we move on. This was volume 1 to the neighbors. So this was really to the law abiding, with your ordinary residents in the community,
Right.
the people that are most concerned about the crime, so to speak, in the community. And then the second volume was supposed to deal with to the hood,
Right.
and
Is it gonna be a volume 2, man?
I mean, this is 10 years old. I got all the
Hey, it's
research.
time for an upgrade.
It's 10
update.
years old now. I'm on a whole nother thing right now.
That topic's still relevant
No,
though.
it's going to be part of the liberation narrative. It's going to be part of the liberation narrative.
I like that update.
But so this is the book that I'm introducing. We're gonna let them introduce their books because they read too.
Yeah, I go next. Tawanna brought like 7 books.
It's gonna be quick. It's gonna be quick. I'm not dropping all the gems on each book that Kwazi did.
That's what's up. So I brought Patricia Hill Collins' Black Feminist Thought. So before you guys jump on me, and Black feminist, right? I think the feminist is necessary. I repeat, I think feminist is necessary. We can get into the dynamics of why it's necessary on another topic, whatever.
It's also misunderstood.
That as well, that too, right? So this here, Black Feminist Thought, is particular. Patrice Hill Collins is writing about Black feminism from a Black woman's perspective, or everyday Black woman. But then inside the book, she's also identifying what she calls Black woman standpoint, which is a play off of feminist standpoint theory, which is basically saying the standpoint of that person or people provides information, provides knowledge of how to deal with that situation. So I'm currently working on my PhD, about to start writing my dissertation. So some of my topic is related to my mother and I, and so looking to understand my oppression is to understand her oppression. So using Black feminist standpoint theory along with Black psychology, Black liberation psychology, feminist standpoint theory, and triple oppression are some of the theories that I'm going to use within the methodology of scholarly personal narrative.
All right, Bunchy. I'm proud of you.
We're not even going to ask why. We're not even going to ask. It's well received.
So I brought a few books just to lift up. One is called "What Tech Calls Thinking." So this is a book to get you in a mindset of the Silicon Valley tech giants who are like defining how we experience culture. Weapons of Math Destruction. This is Kathy O'Neill.
Math.
Weapons of Math Destruction. So this is Yeah, my bad. I'm looking at them. Weapons of mass destruction, how big data increases inequality and threatens democracy. And I'm glad that Kathy O'Neill, I mean, she's a giant in this work, but she talks about big data because we've lost sight. Everything we call everything AI, everything artificial intelligence, but really at the core of it is the extraction of our data, biometric data, all forms of data, like Kwazi just said, communicating our information to a third party. Automating inequality, how high-tech tools profile, police, and punish the poor. This is Virginia Eubanks. This is one of my comrades that I did a lot of work with in our data bodies. So look up this book, look up our data bodies and our research and work. And then finally, one of my favorites and my birthday twin, which I introduced one of her books at our last show. The other book I introduced was Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code, where she's bringing up the Jim Crow era into the data and digital technological area and how it's continued. And her most recent book is Viral Justice, How We Grow the World We Want. She's talking about the resistance, y'all. So these are the books I want to lift up for today.
All right.
And yeah, we
That's
can
the
deep
world we
dive on
moving
a
in.
lot
Oh,
of them
what about the other
in the
one?
future. The other one is my notebook.
Oh, my bad.
But
It looked like
it does
a
have a quote from
okay,
me,
so all right.
which is, if you're not focused, you're distracted.
All right, see, even her notebook look like a book.
All right. Back on agenda. One of the things we want to kind of add to our platform is introducing nomenclature.
Oh, before we go there, just real quick, I know we talked about before. Like, why do we take the time to talk about books? Real quick, just reinforce that point.
Knowledge is power. I think that we need, focused knowledge. I think we need, knowledge that, is very specific to a topic, that explores it with depth, not emotion. And I just think it just broadens our overall, perspective. I just think readers make leaders, at the end of the day, and so I think we should read. We living in a time where we have access to so much information, but people are receiving so little. And I'm concerned, about that. I think books are important. They got digital books. People still read, but are we reading? The people that need to read are the people that's in these trenches, and there's a lot of people that's out here trying to do it, but we all over the place. And the thing is, we'll never find a good strong center until we, begin to try to understand some of these dynamics. We can solve every problem that confront us, but not before we understand the problem. And so, but it takes, a little bit of study. Not that, every book is equal, not that every one who publishes, is saying something, but we definitely should be exploring information that we can expand our own consciousness, our own awareness of the world that we live in, that, we can be grounded in our positions and not out here on some,
Rah. What you said earlier? The big mouth. Yeah, big mouth.
I mean, we all got opinions, and that saying they used to say when I was coming up, opinions is like a-holes. You know what I'm saying? We all got one, and so and that's legit. But all opinions aren't equal.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? All opinions aren't equal. I fall back on Mao Zedong's tongue: no investigation, no right to speak.
So let's substitute the word opinions to analysis, because I think that's
analysis can be flawed too.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean when you say our opinions not equal, our analysis are not equal, because most of these folks are not reading, are not studying to be able to help.
You need content to analyze. That's to be an analyst. You know what I'm saying? An uninformed opinion is not an analysis.
But that's the point, though. Most of these guys think they are providing analysis, and even some of them who are, they're not backing it up with anything because they're not reading. And some of us, we talk about here, and we'll talk about in others, political education. Political education starts with reading books to help shape your mind, where you're taking the time to provide yourself with a historical outlook. So like,
and that ain't to take it all for 100% gospel either. I mean,
no, it's just a process.
But it's something. I mean, you got to learn. Read critical works to help you to think critically. You don't have to accept or embrace everything that's out there, and because I know I don't. But at the same time, I can grow from stuff that I disagree with.
Yeah,
I mean, it can lead my thinking down a path to help expand the way I think about a topic. So it's all relevant, and I think books is important. But let's move
And
on.
I
Cause
do
Yeah, go ahead,
think
Twan.
at the end of the day though that critical thinking is under attack. So
oh,
we live in a world of Chat GPT. We live in a world of Dolly 3 and all of these artificial intelligence and automated ways of creating dialogue, video, words. We're getting to the point where we're not going to be able to believe what we read or what we see. So number
because
one,
it
of
wasn't even wrote
physical
by a human.
books. Yes, wasn't even written by a human. And there's so much enticement and energy and excitement around every new toy that is introduced to us that by the time we realize the impact it's had on us psychologically, we're so far gone. And so having these physical books, especially some of the older books that are that are produced by authors that we know, authors that we vetted, or even if we disagree with them, physical human beings is going to be super important. And so I just think as our critical thinking is under assault and we're losing the concept of what's real and what's not, these books are going to become our lifeline.
And just overall, as we get ready to move on to the next topic, is the anti-intellectualism that has existed for quite some time, where you give folks books and then, man, I ain't read, man, I don't want to read that shit, right? And so I know for myself, for who I am, it was born out of reading. And if anybody is telling you they're trying to do this work, they don't want to read, I wouldn't follow them to a fucking pool party.
Right. No, I mean, no, it's
Well, I
important.
might follow them to a pool
I ain't
party. I'm
following
not
to a
following
pool.
them to a library.
Well, check it out.
Okay.
In addition to now, in addition to reading, I think that we live in a time when our discourse is shaped by language.
Mhm.
I've long, been fond of a quote by Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the Kenyan novelist, who wrote who's one of the things who's popular for is the phrase decolonizing the mind,
Mhm.
because he wrote a book called Decolonizing the Mind. But he also talked about in that book, he talked about language being a carrier of culture. What does that mean? Carrier of culture. Words possess power. There's triggers built into words, not intentionally, but just by nature. And certain language harms us, like a racial epithet. And some you see somebody in the store, they mad because you got to the line first,
Right.
and they say something disrespectful, and that word triggers you
Right.
because you know what that word means. It's loaded with a history of not
They've
just more
weaponized it.
words, but it
Mhm.
might have practices behind that word. And but the larger media and the powers that be tend to trying to use words to shape the way we think about reality.
And ourselves.
Yes, absolutely, about ourselves. And I mean, we got to remember that they did not allow us to use our own words when we were captured and enslaved here in America. They told us we can only use their words.
Their language.
Yes, and their language is a care to their culture. Their language is where black mean evil, uh, dead, lazy, in all of these despicable terms. In their language, that's what it means. The color itself is a color.
Yeah.
And it means, it's you can translate it to practically any language in the world where that color is found.
Right.
And that word doesn't define necessarily the same. White means death in many segments of Africa before the encounter of Europeans. And that doesn't mean that white means death and that white people are, it doesn't mean that, but words have power in that way. And we
And
were
that's the way
taught
they
that
experienced.
we were taught that
Yeah.
white means supreme,
Right.
superior.
Right.
And therefore it's a culture, and they push that culture, but it's all built into another term that they forced on us, which is new, called race. And of course, race was used to categorize humanity, of course, with white on top, always with white on top. It was a way to segment society. And we get caught into this struggle around these words without understanding their deeper meanings. And then we can't understand, hence the struggle I was talking about earlier about the Hawaiians.
Yeah.
They use race to frame this beating of this Anglo, but it had nothing to do with race. This had to do with their land and their human dignity.
Yeah.
It had to do with their human dignity. It's a colonial, you know what I'm saying, offense that they was rectifying. They was dealing with that. And it had nothing to do with hating him. And it had nothing to do with hostility. They hate being treated a certain way. When one of us lash out at somebody out of rage and anger, you know, it's not because they're white, it's because of what that represents and has represented over time. Right. But we can let that language control us. And, you know, language has the power to what we used to say early on in my development, create, build, or destroy.
Right. I mean, look at the half century of propaganda assault that was waged against Detroit at the onset of Mayor Coleman Young's election.
Yes, against the city.
So you're looking at a half century of targeted propaganda.
It led to bankruptcy.
And it led to how a lot of people internalized within the city, how they viewed what vibrancy looked like, who should be in leadership, who we should follow, what progress was, who was, you know, whose schools were viable, whose infrastructure was worthy to live in and invest in. I mean, so you're talking about my entire life, Detroit, until the election of Duggan, had one dominant, pervasive, negative narrative. That's a city full of
and
hopeless,
it changed since then.
Yes, it went from that to Detroit is coming back, which is synonymous with Make America Great Again.
Yes.
So you know, if you think about like people dog out words, but at the end of the day, it was words, it was language that shaped the culture of how Detroiters saw themselves and how the world saw Detroit, and that translated to disinvestment and so many other violent things that come under repression.
Yeah, I remember when the current mayor was first running, after having New African leadership in the city since Coleman Young in 1974. I remember people saying, we need somebody new. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of candidates with a wide range of credentials who was running for that office. Duggan just happened to be the only one who was not New African. And by default, people said we need change. They was really, I mean, without saying it, they were saying we can't deal with it. We can't have another black leader.
We never had a black governor.
But you know, but what's missing in your analysis to Tawanna's, I think your earlier point about Coleman Young, Tawanna just explained it, of how they shaped the narrative is also on the backs of Kwame, because they did the same thing with Kwame.
No, everybody since.
Right, but I'm saying, but because the media zoomed in on his action, we're here to debate that, whatever. But
they saw a similar cockiness in Kwame that they had seen in Coleman Young.
Right.
So they knew that he was somebody who was going to
use technology,
be very vocal.
Yeah. But they created a narrative. They created an anti-black narrative, which leads to your point, because you're right. Around the time was time to give a white guy a chance, because we felt.
Was us saying that.
Yeah, it was us saying
that. Was us saying
that's
that.
my point.
They chipped
and chipped
and that's what we meant.
And humanity, and created a situation where we could no longer trust ourselves to be self-governing. And so when this cocky young black man who they saw Coleman Young similarities, where I'm going to stand up and push this.
We're going to thug him out.
Exactly. We're not going to let another Coleman Young up in the city.
But he was saying
he did some dumb stuff, but at the end of the day, so did every other mayor that came before him.
I ain't even going to talk about the dumb stuff he did. What feared them the most was those private conversations they intercepted.
Right.
Which he was talking to his people about, black man, we're going to do this. We're not going to let these people run roughshod over us. It was a lot of those conversations that the media didn't emphasize.
He exuded self-determination.
Yes.
And he was confident in who he was, which was similar to Coleman Young, who came in and we can do a bunch of debate about making the police force black, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is, at the time, he did some things that they felt like, how a nigga gonna come up in here and tell us we gotta leave, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. And Kwame came in with that same sort of swagger.
But also,
and they wasn't gonna let that happen again.
But also, to your point of him exhibiting self.
Excuse my language and saying the N-word. I'm saying it in a way that contextualizes.
But I think this ties into the self-determination, right? But the self-determination is not about an individual, because we're talking about also what get lost in the translation, a predominantly black city.
Right.
So this surveillance that happens on Kwame, that happened on Coleman Young, also mirrors what some of us know within the COINTELPRO, which was to stop a messiah that can mobilize and organize a group of people. So again, when we think about surveillance, how it functions as an arm of white hegemony to prevent not the self-determination of an individual, but self-determination of a group of people that's challenging the state, that's challenging their oppression.
Which means, I mean, and he's not above critique, you know.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I agree.
You're right. All right, let's get to nomenclature real quick so we can get to our topic, because we actually got a shorter show today. We're gonna be concluding at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So yes, we on a short clock right now, but we did want to incorporate nomenclature into this conversation, the importance of words and in trying to shape discourse. A lot of what we've been talking about throughout the show is about repression. What is repression? Repression is the use of coercive state power and policy to harass, surveil, spy upon, monitor, ban, arrest, torture, and kill through direct agents or agencies of the state, or city in this case, or collaborative agents and agencies with beneficial interests. That is what repression or state repression is. We see it manifesting in so many ways. State repression is blocking CRT, banning books in schools, that you can't have access to wide information. But like I say, it happens in electoral politics when they start redistricting, you know what I'm saying? When they start expanding police, that is an obvious form of repressive power. When they use the police against protesters, those same protesters who do what they said in the U.S. settler documents about being able to rise up against a government,
right?
You know, the same thing they did against Britain. You know, it's intolerable when it's to rise up against them, unless it's a bunch of the right wingers taking over the Capitol. You know what I'm saying? You know, they don't mind them doing that.
They want to make sure they're treated right in prison. That's up for lawsuit right now.
But they use certain trigger language,
treated right,
you know, like crime. Like crime is a huge word that triggers and gets our endorsement for repressive measures. And we got to look closer at that. And I think that's important when we talk about surveillance society, this mass surveillance, this surveillance being deployed against us. And, you know, we growing into this technology. I mean, Tawanna is here as, I'm going to call her an expert because she's been teaching me so much. But it's important that we understand, because this technology, we accepting it so fast, but it's really becoming a dominant force over our lives. Our cell phones is a tracking device.
Right.
If you use your fingerprint, if you use that lock, you're in some database with a fingerprint without them having to fingerprint you.
Right.
It can get your eyes, because they have this technology where it can your screen stay alive when you're looking at it. It's so many features to these devices.
Some people voluntarily give their face print to open their phone.
So, right, I mean, that's just one little thing. We got Ring doorbells and there's, you know, various variations of it on our homes, shining cameras. And we talked about recently about the Green Light Project with nearly 5,000 cameras aimed at us in our city. Not to mention the microphones from Spot Shotter, you know what I'm saying? So we're talking about all these different forms of repression that we kind of casually accept under the assumption that, well, if I ain't doing nothing, what different? I don't want you to see me pee.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean that literally, because one time I was downtown, I had to pee, and they got cameras in the alleys.
Everybody was watching.
I couldn't even get behind the dumpster and, you know what I'm saying, release. I'm like, what the?
There is no more public freedom in open space.
Well, because you'll be a sexual offender if you get caught. You know what I'm saying? So, so repression, you know, it dogs our trail in so many different ways, and we have to be aware of this repression. I have an example, and I learned this from that show you were on, one of your who was on the show, one of the recent podcasts. It was talking about Uganda.
Oh, 1A NPR?
I believe it was the NPR when you was on NPR. And they talked about the repression they're using of facial recognition in Uganda.
Similar to Hong Kong.
President Yusef, who's been in office for decades, who's, you know what I'm saying, you know, old man, started out young man, old man, who've been pushing back against, I'm going to say, Bobby Wine, one of the entertainers over there, who's been a politician. And really speaking on behalf of the people, and they've been doing very repressive, but they use facial recognition. They spend hundreds of millions for these Chinese technicians to install this stuff in certain key cities that they can identify people that's working with the opposition campaigns.
Yeah.
They would detain, arrest before elections, that they can't do their organizing work, that they just kind of get removed. Then they get let go afterwards because the incumbent win.
Contain them for that.
Yes, and
period of
so
time.
this technology get deployed, and they don't know this while it's happening.
Right.
It kind of got discovered, and they kind of got leaked, or people began to learn about it.
Social justice, research, activism. That's the only way we find out a lot of this stuff.
So we have to be just a little more cautious about it. And you always tell us about the weakness of facial recognition and how it's flawed.
Yeah.
And it's not effective. But then there's another thing I want to ask you about, this gait recognition technology. I don't know if our audience are familiar with this gait recognition.
Yes, I mean, so all of it's biometric surveillance, right? You named the fingerprinting, the facial identification. When you use it on your cell phone, it's like 1-to-1, right? It's your face in that device. IRS website, a lot of what ID.me, one to your IRS account, right? But what happens is, though there's no real federal regulation that's preventing those tech companies from putting you into a database, which then it becomes a one-to-many match. So it's your face and like everybody else's face being compared through a database, which is how they leverage facial recognition in Detroit under Project Greenlight. So they have a massive database. They use Michigan State SNAP database. They also leverage social media. I always forget the acronym, but it's like it's a database with millions of images. It contains all the state IDs, driver's licenses.
So everybody take a state ID, get put in the system.
It's in the database. It contains images they pull off social media. It contains images from probably tech companies where we swipe, let me use my face to unlock my phone, different things. We have no real concept of all the places that they gather the images from. But what happens when you have a one person matched to millions, the likeliness of you having accuracy decreases. So you're trying to run this blackface through an image of 10 million black faces. There's going to be similarities. So you might pick out the wrong person, which we're seeing more and more instances of that. And Dr. Bolamwini and Dr. Timnit Gebru, they did groundbreaking research, Gender Shade, which tells you about the inaccuracies of facial recognition. Regarding gait detection, that's how you walk. How your swag, you know what I'm saying? Bunchy, you could pick out a mile away with how he walks.
Is it
right?
easy to change your walk? I mean, can you disguise your walk? How often
people can try. People can try, but you're gonna chances are you're gonna default to how you move, how you naturally move. And then if you're switching it up and there's so much surveillance, then they're gonna have all the versions that you switch to as well. And so the U.S. is in a competition with China, in a tech competition. They want to be the global leader in technology. China is a social credit system where they monitor every single thing you do all day throughout. And people who are doing well, just like wealthy people in the US or upper middle class people, they like to have a good social credit score. So they volunteer into these systems so that they can just walk in a store and pick up something and not pull out a wallet. They can hop on a train and not pull out a wallet. You walk past, your face is doing everything. Once you fall under that score, though, then you're prohibited from going into those very same places. So you have people in China who can't go to a certain hotel, can't get on a certain train, can't even leave China because their social credit score is too low because they jaywalked 5 times, so it goes down every time you do something that the government deems inappropriate. And so that's the direction that we're moving in. When you let a city like Detroit, as an example, be surrounded by surveillance technologies, no real federal regulation, no real governance of law enforcement. We have an inept civilian oversight body. We have an inept city council. We have a mayor who's in lockstep with law enforcement. So all these things that we're volunteering into doing without real scrutiny creates a situation where we are the black experiment for how you make those things more quote unquote accurate.
So I just want to ask real quick. So is that you said this is where we're leading to, but the social credit in China, is that got here in America yet? Or make sure I heard you clear, that's where it's kind of becoming a model because them two compete with each other.
I venture not to say that we're at that level yet, but I'll use an example in
Okay.
Detroit that we were very vocal about. When the pandemic first hit, Detroiters were hit with $1,000 tickets for not social distancing. So they leveraged Project Greenlight to monitor certain areas where they saw us congregating,
Right.
and then they deploy officers to give out tickets. Think about that. When the median household income in Detroit is under $35,000 a year, a $1,000 ticket for not social distancing can set somebody on a trajectory to lose everything. At the same time that they were doing that in Detroit, they were storming the Capitol in Lansing. This is before January 6th. It was white folks all through the streets, all no social distancing, no masks, protesting, guns going through the state capitol. Not a single ticket was issued.
Right. Now, what raised my eyebrows about this gait recognition technology is, based on the little research I've done, nowhere compared to what you may know, it is considered 95, over 90% accurate in all this, field studies to date, that it's more accurate. And they began to deploy gait recognition when, particularly after the pandemic, when they realized everybody was wearing masks, you can't see the face anyway. So they said,
but think about 95% though. That's some facial recognition companies say they're 95, 96, 97%. But think about that 3%, which could translate to millions of people.
Yeah, but I worry about being identified by a walk.
Right.
Yeah.
That I'm walking down the street and they say, that was you over there when this thing was happening. And it was like, that wasn't me.
Right.
But here's some.
Everybody I might walk like somebody, or somebody might walk like me.
Chances are you do.
Yeah.
But it's some
fingerprint.
But here's some of my experience to your point around the during COVID. So a friend of mine, we was in Royal Oak, standing outside and just talking. We didn't pay for the parking thing. They mailed us a parking ticket.
Oh yeah.
But it was using the technology of our license plate and
well, Detroit has that now.
They
have
have
surveillance traffic cameras now.
Yeah.
So they don't need you to be present anymore.
So it falls into your definition. I mean, this is
no, it's definitely repressive. It's definitely we're rapidly moving to a repressive society that we are co-signing, because we click accept on the terms and conditions every time, without knowing the consequences of that click. And we're welcoming. When we click it, we also endorse and sanction these forces against ourselves. So we weaponize these things, and we, for all the conveniences that they offer,
luxury surveillance,
right? For all the convenience they offer, it's a very dark downside that we're not considering. And of course, most of them don't even want to think about that. That's depressing. I ain't got time for that. I'm trying to live my best life. I ain't got to be time to be worrying about that. But we should. I think it's important. We're at the end of our show, and we haven't really hit the topics.
Yeah, we did. We talked about surveillance state, police. Police, military.
But it was something very important.
Surveillance.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to get on in our next. But we did really talk about the police and military build up, particularly Cop City. Down in Georgia,
it all starts with surveillance.
And Grayling, the National Guard in Grayling, Michigan.
Not only starts with surveillance, starts with a word in the terms of how to use it, a carceral state.
You get Bunchy one new word, and he like.
Listen, a lot of these new words are trying to throw us off track too. So
but for this one though,
police state.
But
police state.
True.
Yeah, but the carceral mentality is what's helped.
Exactly.
Is where that volunteerism comes in, where you're like, oh, I have nothing to hide. Oh, yes, please bring me more green lights. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's part of the police state, but it's a mindset that contributes
to. They call it carceral mentality.
It's a carceral mentality.
It's like it's creating the conditions of buying into it. Same like the tough on crime.
Right.
Because also when we go to the next show, but when we think about crime, we think about young brothers and sisters on like, oh man, criminal whatnot. So, but it gets to legitimizing.
It's part of the police state. It's part of the police state. It's just
phases of it.
It's the mindset. But just to be careful, like we don't take all the ownership, like you're saying. We're sometimes being coerced. I want to talk at some point about the conflation between consent and coercion. right? So we're being coerced in many ways into thinking this way.
That is true.
And
Yeah.
so,
That
you
is
know,
true.
I'm
I've
not trying to
experienced
shift
that.
the blame onto us individually. Still, we need some systemic
Right.
resistance.
Nah.
So as we end, any last closing
Yeah,
remarks?
I just want people to know we can come in back hard on talking about Cop City and the campaign to stop it. All the ramifications and the fundings and all the issues related to Cop City. And we have something right here in our own backyard up in northern Michigan, Lower Peninsula, of course, but northern Grayling, Michigan, where they're trying to expand National Guard, which is already nearly twice the size of Detroit, and they're trying to double it. So you would nearly get 3 Detroits inside it if they expand it. We're talking about trying to find my notes. It's currently 48,000 acres, which is 230 square miles. In context, Detroit is 140 square miles. They're trying to double it, more than double it, because they're trying to get an additional 160,000 acres, which equivalent of 250 square miles. So to make a combined 480 square miles, again, you can fit 3 Detroits in there. And we're talking about military training where they're going to be bringing private innovators in there to test and explore and experiment with technologies. And so we're going to come back next week. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be in depth on that. Thank you for tuning in. Detroit, we do mind dying, and we're going to fight to live, rebuild to win.
Ashe, build to win.
That's it, baby.